Well, I see a comment coming through here. He says, well, he's always been professing that a problem in this country stems from sincere ignorance and consensus stupidity. Oh dear.
That's what the person thinks. Yeah, well, to a large extent it does, but I think before you get to the second stage, you have to deal with the first stage. Stupidity has a lot to do with an ability of a person to deal with and analyze figures. That's IQ. But ignorance, it's very difficult to know when a man is ignorant. You know, like I said last week, there are two kinds of bad leadership manifestations you have. There is the malevolent and the ignorant. By the malevolent, meaning in simple English, the bad people who have developed bad character from day one. From my unorthodox research, because I deal with this a lot, I would say that the ignorant are the majority, 80%. I mean, I have found out, for example, when I run leadership training programs, and I've done it at high levels and at medium levels and for people who are at the beginning levels, I find out that the first day I was shocked was when I had to take a leadership program for people, all of who were at the top levels in their professions. And I discovered that most of them were looking at me as if I had just arrived from Mars. The things I was saying, nobody had said it to them all the way on their journey to the top. So which meant that if a man had been in the system for 30 years, he had perpetuated a continuous mindset of ignorance until it had become solidified.
Is it also possible, I mean, there's so many things that you talk about, but is it also possible to be a leader without even knowing the concept of leadership?
Yes,
per se.
It is very much easy. In fact, I tell you something, you can be. But the difference is that you are, it's like I watched a film called The Accidental Husband. You become an accidental leader. And expecting leadership to be manifested in an accidental way is like looking for a genius. Geniuses are a minority. They're a small group. There are some people, take music. There are some people, I know a man who never went to music school, and yet he has won 4 Grammys. But the majority of people who win Grammys had to go and learn how to play the instruments. Now, that's where the challenge arises. That it's something that you can learn, or something that can come to you almost, I wouldn't say you will still learn it. This is my view, actually. Right? Every leader learns leadership. It's just that some people learn it unconsciously, and some people have to learn it consciously.
Well, some think it's an abstract when you want to teach certain things or tell them to imbibe certain ways of living.
And that's the reason that those who think it's an abstract is because they themselves have not explored what it comes to mean, basically. For example, I was sharing with somebody the other day. I said, I was talking about somebody who was given an appointment in a particular office, but grew up in the home of a permanent secretary. Now, I mean, when the person began to take certain specific action, everybody said, you're so good at it, yet you've not held office before. And I said to that person, the reason why you are good at it is that although your father was coming home and discussing, so I'm not talking about permanent secretary now, it's not that I'm putting them down, but I'm talking about permanent secretary of the 70s. Although your father was coming home and you did not think you were paying attention to what he was saying, inadvertently you are taking on board certain things. So you actually had gone through a learning process. It may just not have been a formal learning process. But if you wait for that informal learning process, it's as good as waiting for someone to become a good presenter without having learned how to present. You can get 1 or 2. I'm sure if you come into channels now, there are some people, if you pick them on the street now and you put them to present this program, you'll be amazed. But the statistical likelihood of that happening is very low.
So can we also say that some people must inherently have a talent for leadership?
No, I don't think I think personally speaking, everybody does have a level of talent for leadership, because all of us have an ability to affect our environment. All of us do. But we all affect it in different ways. What do I mean by that? There are those who are extroverts and are good talkers. That's their natural forte. So they are able to affect by their communication. There are those who are good planners. They don't talk much, but they come out with a detailed, wonderful package that everybody can follow. So they're able to affect it by the intensity of the work they do that allows everybody to follow them. So each of us has one thing or the other that can create a followership. What does not allow us to do it are a number of things. The first one is what I said about our being people that don't introspect. If we have not worked on ourselves to enhance the things that we have internally that allow people to follow us, then people will not follow us. We become like a man whose talent is hidden under the carpet. The second thing is, if we have nowhere we are going, which is where I was talking about rigor. If you have nothing, no shared, Peter Senge calls vision, a shared picture of a future we seek to create. So if we have no future, we are saying, this is where we'd like to go. If you start a school today, for example, if Michael starts a school today, he says, I'm going to start a school. But that school has no picture of where it wants to be in 10 years' time, or the kind of children you intend to bring out. Automatically, it's got nothing to do with being born. God got something to do with the fact that people have nothing to follow.
So what kind of effect can the followers, can they spur the leaders into action?
Well, you see, that's where the challenge arises. If you consider the leader only by position, then the result is you are bound by the limit of that position and that person's position. But do you know that you can be a subordinate and still lead your leader? De Hawk made a statement. He said, anyone who wants to lead must spend 50% of his energy leading himself, 20% leading his superiors, so-called, 15% leading his peers, and then only 15% for subordinates. Now, what he implied, therefore, is that let's go back to what the fundamental meaning of leadership is. W.C.H. Prentice of Harvard said something, that leadership is the process. The leadership is the discipline of deliberately exerting special influence within a group to move the group towards goals of beneficial permanence that fulfills the group's real needs. Now, that's a long something, so never mind the length. But the key thing, what he was saying, is that leadership is a discipline, meaning that you learn the process of how to exert influence. For example, if you work with, a few years ago, I was invited by my old university. They call it Obafemi Awolowo University now. I have this regular joke with them that when I went there, it was called University of Ife, and I would like to stick with the old name. But I was invited to the university to address the entire university on leadership. Especially they had a head of department and dean's program. And I remember that I talked about vectors of leadership. I wrote a book which I called Vectors of Leadership. And I was telling them that vector is that thing that you do that enhances your impact and your ability to move people and the direction you move them to. And among the vectors, there were 5 of them: knowledge, vision, your leadership over self, your power of execution, and how you lead other people. So one of the men got up and said, how do I provide leadership when I'm not the man at the top? And I gave them a simple analogy and a simple story. I said to them, imagine that a vehicle was leaving Ife and going to Abuja, and it had 3 professors and 1 student in a station wagon. The likelihood is that the station wagon, because all of us who have traveled by station wagon know that the back seat is the most uncomfortable seat, would be the seat for the student. I said, but if as they drive along and they get to Owo, and the professors do not know the road to Abuja, and the student says that's the turning, and they ignore him because he's a student, and then they ask the vulcanizer after, and he tells them, you just missed the turning, go back and turn to the right. I said, where do you think the student will sit from that moment on? And everybody said, in the front seat. And I said, if that student, therefore, halfway on that journey decides that his father's house is on that road, he wants to stop by, all he has to do is turn around and tell them, this is where people normally stop to ease themselves, and they would stop. What has happened? Although he's still a student, he has become the leader of the situation. So the fundamental thing that we need to do, therefore, is to enhance. Our challenge is we need to work on where we want to go, and we need to work on it with rigor. We need to stop selling ourselves short, even in the politics, even in the things that we say. I mean, you see Nigerians give up minor things because they have no dream of a future.
So all those things add up to the big picture.
They do. They end up adding up to the big picture. I like to place a demand on people. I go to the airport, and sometimes people think I'm troublesome. Yes, I am. Not troublesome in the sense of that I don't scatter the place, I don't burn down things. But I like to place a demand on people to behave.
Like minor things?
What kind of minor things? I mean, I was at the airport the other day. I was on a queue, and one corporal or sergeant jumped in front of the queue. And I said, excuse me, what do you think you're doing? I'm on a queue. And the guy said, excuse me, sir, I'm sorry. I said, I'm not angry. And then he said, well, my boss is supposed to check in. I said, and where's your boss? He said, it's at the back. I said, well, tell your boss to either come and queue, or if he's sending you, he should queue. And everybody gathered around and started saying, oh God, don't be angry. Yes, okay, you've made your point. I told the man, I'm not trying to make a point. It's not a debating society. It's not about who wins points. I'm saying that go to the back of the queue. That's why I'm queuing as well. And I told him I'm willing to bet that your boss whom you are talking about, if I was in the army with him, I would be his senior. And I'm on the queue. I said, so get on the queue. So the point I'm making is that there are little things. Set a benchmark for what the people can become. Set a desire. And do you know interesting thing about leadership, which I've discovered, is that if you begin to provide leadership in a small place, ultimately you will end up providing it in a big place, because people at the bottom of their mind know who they can follow. It's instinctive.
But they don't ordinarily follow.
They may not immediately follow. You see, one of our challenges in Nigeria, let me address this clearly. One of our challenges in Nigeria is that we want everything done yesterday. We are very impatient people. So if I begin to do something and Chamberlain doesn't follow me immediately, my initial reaction is, that's why it's a frustrating activity. First of all, Chamberlain can't follow me immediately for two simple reasons. He doesn't see what I see, and he doesn't know what I know. Therefore, my first responsibility when you don't follow me is to come back and ask myself, why is Chamberlain not following me? And then to get back and say, what do I need to do to get Chamberlain? I mean, I read an article in Reader's Digest one day that I've used a lot in illustration. The man went into a park and saw a bench. And on that bench, they wrote wet paint, W-E-T-P-E-N-T. And he said, this spelling is wrong. And he was upset. So he started looking around to see who had written wet paint there, and found another man, the man painting another bench. So he walks up to the man and says to him, the spelling there is wrong, wet paint. The man said, I know. He said, then why didn't you correct it? The man said, for a long time, I kept on writing wet paint. People will look at it and sit on the paint. He said, but since I wrote wet paint, they look at it, they get angry, they look for me to tell me the spelling is wrong, and then they don't sit on the paint. He said, that's why I'm keeping it as wet paint. That's what
so he gets more result that way.
He gets more result because people now follow him, because he's forcing them to engage the discussion.